Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. I know a lot of you know my story, and it's kind of treacherous, right? But the Lord has also allowed me to do a lot of really cool things in my life, and it sounds like I've lived many lives in one. So this word is interesting because I don't think that the Lord has ever had me deliver a word with this in it. So for the past 22 years, I've been a pastor and a pastoral counselor and an author. Those things kind of go hand in hand. And since we don't make a lot of money as pastors, you always have a side job. And I've been a journalist. And many of you who wondered why I was familiar looking to you were people who had watched the 700 Club or CBN. And I was sitting here today and I was thinking about how so many young people get caught up in where they want to be next. I turned 40 this year. And can I tell you that getting older is not what you think it is? It's actually really beautiful. I have been in a little bit of every world. I was fortunate enough to get to model. I've been a radio host. I've been a solo pianist. I've been a journalist. I've been a voice actor. I've did a little bit of everything in my life. I've been on the cover of magazines. I'm the youngest person to date to write for Mature Living, which is a branch off of Christianity Today, which you've probably crossed in your Christian bookstore or your Barnes & Noble many times. For years, I was a columnist for War Cry, which circulates 2 million copies every 2 weeks. So if I've ever looked familiar to you, it's not just that God showed you my face. It's that you might have ran across my face somewhere. And I usually don't talk about those things because I was raised in the South and we were taught that we were to be super humble. And I am. I'm really gracious and grateful that the Lord's allowed me to do all those beautiful things in my life. But I tell you these things, I can tell you something else. The Lord really set me up to make a choice in my life. And when the Lord makes you good at a couple things, you might not feel good at many things, but when I was good at many things, I didn't feel good at them. I wasn't really sure why people liked me. They just did, and I didn't always like me. So that was kind of confusing. Like, why does other people like you? But over time, I realized something, and I feel like it might set somebody free today. A lot of times, the Lord will give us many things we're good at, right? And when you model, a lot of times you're born with a specific bone structure. There's all kinds of models, but the kind of modeling that I did had a lot to do with my bone structure and how small that I was. And even though I was good at that, and even though I still am, and even though I could have took that route, even though I had a contract in front of me at one time that was Kate Moss's agency at that time in space, in time, I didn't do it. I've been on book tour with some of the people that you would recognize and go, oh my gosh. And I wasn't as big of a seller as they were. I was just on tour with them. And I've sit in little jazz bars and played for people and been a novelty because I was young when I played the piano and you were good. And I learned from a woman that went to Juilliard and taught at Juilliard. And if you had natural talent, which I got from my family, we were all musicians. And it felt like the world was your oyster, and at the same time, you didn't know what in the world you were supposed to do. Which sounds like woe is me. I get it. But it's almost like God sprinkled that over the very tragic spaces of my life that you've read about or heard about, or maybe you don't know about. And can I tell you that what ended up being my calling was not what I was good at. Now, after 22 years, you could argue that I'm a good shepherd. You could argue that. And if I come to your women's conference, or I showed up to your pastor's retreat, or I come and talk to your church, and you walked away and said, man, Pastor Brooke, I love when you come and talk to us, I'd believe you. But if you would have asked me 15 years ago if I ever thought that I would be good at what I do, I would tell you no. Here's the thing, is a lot of you are striving to fit in places that the Lord didn't call you to. Don't mean you're not good at it. It don't mean you can't do it. And even though I still write, and that's still a big part of my calling because it just ties all into itself. And I'll always be a writer. It's a big part of my identity. It was harder for me to get in front of people and be eloquent and not nervous because I was taught that my voice was always wrong. When you grow up in an abusive home and you marry into that, you're always wrong. And even when you're not wrong, you're wrong to be safe, so you just apologize. And it was harder for me to do the thing I was called to do than the things I was naturally good at. If you handed me a piece of classical music right now, give me 30 minutes and I could play it for you. If we were on your podcast and you said, I don't know what we're going to talk about, that wouldn't make me nervous because I've been a radio host. That's easy. Just be yourself. If you told me we're going to go out in the field and catch the light, we were going to take pictures, I'd get excited. That's fun. I love to do that. But sometimes the Lord will call you to the thing you're not good at. It's why a lot of people in worship will all of a sudden get called to the pulpit. Because you can rely on yourself when you're a good singer. You can rely on yourself when you're a good piano player. You can rely on yourself when your personality is good. But when you have to get out of the way and let God be in what you do, it's a little scary. So even though you might argue that I'm really good at what I do now, I'm only good at what I do now because I've spent 22 years learning how to get out of the way. Learning how to understand that this isn't the thing that I naturally just did the best. It's the thing that the Lord had to mold me into and I had to get out of the way of so that He could increase and I could decrease. I think a lot of times people get drawn to the prophetic because it's popular. Or you get drawn to the pulpit because you think it's glamorous. It's not. It's not. Sunday's end, and you are tired, and people are going to get mad at you, and people are going to love you one day, hate you the next, love you again next Wednesday. And you have to get okay with that. You can't get so caught up in thinking that life is passing you by, or that you're not good at anything, or that you're good at everything but nothing seems to succeed. It really don't matter what the story is. All that really matters at the end of the day is, are you being obedient to do what the Lord called you to do, not what you're good at? Because it took me years to be good at what I was called to. But it took obedience and sacrifice to show up when I wasn't good. So what's God asking you to do? And what are you so caught up in? Is it your looks? Is it the way you sound? Is it what you think people will think? Opinions shouldn't matter, and even if you do take them, they might ought to come from somebody who's doing what you do better than you. So if a colleague of mine says something like, Brooke, that book could have been better. Fair. They might be right. I might need to go back and figure out how I could write better next time. But you can't take advice from people who ain't doing nothing. What is God asking you to do? And if it's bigger than you, you're probably right. Be obedient is better than sacrifice.